Hello and welcome. This is my interview with the principal that I recently conducted. My name is Zeb Kello, and in the language of the syllabus, this would be a might be professional development that I've created for my teachers. What I want to talk about specifically is just some things I pulled out of the interview. It was quite a lengthy interview, things that I feel like will be worthwhile to all teachers and administrators. So, first, some background information. I interviewed an administrator of 27 years who is in a successful, excellent rated junior high school. And she currently has a rural population, but it's slowly changing to be more suburban. So there isn't any special ed coordinator in the school, so all the responsibility fall on this lady. So, a couple things I found as part of this sound advice, as I like to look at, are basically funding issues that she discussed, staffing and teacher participation, professional development opportunities, parental involvement within IEPs, communication with parents, and then having the best people in the right places. I'll kind of summarize and explain what all of that means as I go through. So I've broken this into two different areas. One are challenges, things that she saw that were kind of some issues you have to deal with. And then the other part is some solutions or some things that I felt like she kind of gave some 2 cents about, like, hey, you can do this. First one, which is really big, and you'll see this as an ongoing theme, is money. Money and funding are really dictate what can happen with a student in IEP. Making sure that, and she said the biggest issue was trying to make sure that she had the student, special ed teacher and student with special needs ratio to be appropriate. And then the other thing is, she says, and I hate to say this, but she felt like, long story short, try to educate these students to the most cheaply as possible, is how she put it. So she also talked about funding issues when it talked about paraprofessionals and professional development opportunities, and just some things that deal with the whole funding process and about maybe some inadequacies within the funding process as well. Moving on, number 2. She talked about staff buy-in. She talked about, getting the staff to buy into this idea that that special ed student is your student, that is your child, that is your person. And so when you start to think about it, she said 95% of all of the teachers buy into this. However, there is a small percentage that do not. And they're older teachers, as she, in her own words, old school is what she said, and basically teachers who have been burnt along the process, just with students taking a test and then not showing adequate growth, where maybe there was too much help. It sounds like with the scenario that she gave that was available to the student, which in the end didn't help the student, obviously the teacher, where the teacher actually asked the questions that were on the test after the student did so well on it, and the student could not give correct answers. So anyway, the other thing they also talk about staff buy-in is this idea of PD and professional development and staff participation. Several different things they're doing right now is they're doing IEP Anywhere, which is an online software that teachers, your psychologists, school administrators, everyone can actually put information in and build a case file online for a kid, for a student, so that they can help them. The other thing they're also doing too is some professional development with RTI. And of course, not just what is RTI, but they're looking to say how can they actually give accommodations and modifications, real tools for their teachers to actually use daily. And so one of the things that was discussed is this idea of, here's your Bloom's taxonomy. What are accommodations that what do they look like all along Bloom's, from the highest level to the lowest level of learners? And so I thought that was really interesting, that this is going to be a year-long professional development opportunity. And then the last little piece is technology, and of course, specifically moving to one-to-one devices, but also tied back into special ed is students who will need that technology to go ahead and to express themselves, especially students who have some writing issues. And so trying to get some professional development time for those students, paraprofessionals, special ed teachers, and teachers. So, the third challenge that they look at is parents. They still worry about this label of special ed, that their student's going to be pulled out and put into a closet that's or an old janitor's closet that's turned into a classroom. Funny enough, she said this hasn't happened in her district as long as she can remember, that they've always had kind of a mainstream mentality, but parents still fear this because of some of their past experiences in maybe other districts or just what they see on the media. The fourth challenge is sometimes parents become a little pushy. One of the things that they always revert back to is trying to get their student a one-on-one paraprofessional, but yet most of the time students don't qualify for that. And so this is where it kind of ties into a solution is having a good school psychologist, or in some cases a special ed coordinator, and of course special ed teachers, really good to be able to explain what excuse me, free and appropriate public education actually is and what it looks like and what their student qualifies for based off of the data and assessments that were given. And I thought that was a really important thing. So kind of coming back to, hey, this is what the data says and this is what it looks like. Solutions, moving into solutions. One of them is listen to your special ed teachers. She could not emphasize this enough to just come back and say, hey, they're going to know what's going on. They're going to know what's best for students. Kind of saying, hey, how can I help you? One of the things that I thought was interesting she's talked about is not overburdening the special ed teacher where so much that they're what they feel like is all the paperwork they have to deal with and the evaluations and information coming from doctors and coming from psychologists and that kind of stuff, to try to streamline that process a little bit. And one of the things, going back to the funding issue that the administrator mentioned, was she felt like if she could do one thing that would help this whole process, would hire more special ed teachers and hire more teachers. She doesn't like the idea of cramming students into classes to where those teachers feel so overwhelmed. The second one is, she talked about this, is know your special ed law. Know what it means. Looking and saying, what do all of the parts, and of course this is why we're in the class, of the special ed law and requirements are. Know what your state laws are, and know what some of the rulings are that's happened based around special education. And so, getting to this point to be able to explain what these laws look like in layman's terms, to break it down for parents, is really essential to help build a strong relationship with them. The other thing is knowing your public your avenues or public services that are offered. They use Wood County services, and so of course it's a school in Wood County, so they look a lot to see what are other things that are out there that they can use to help service students, and including BGSU and even Owens Community College or some other resources they've used with students. The third area is create a common terminology. This principal actually went through and created like what would be like a cheat sheet, a common terminology of information that's happening there so that anyone can look and understand what those terms mean. The other part too that I thought was interesting is it's going to tie in once again, kind of creating some coherence there with the RTI process. And so really having this terminology, and then also having the terminology available for the parents so that they can actually look and see, okay, what does MFE mean? Oh, that means a multi-factor evaluation, and then see, well, who is involved, and kind of get to see all the people that are involved. That way, parents are sitting there in the middle of an IEP, and I think about this so many times with myself, in the middle of an IEP meeting, that there's language and terms thrown around all the time, and Ames Webs and STAR testing and all this, to where a parent has no idea what's going on, and unless they're in the educational setting. And so, one of the things that the principal is very good at doing is stopping the school psychologist, say, okay, what does that mean? What does the data look like? What is a typical kid? Where does this child score in this? How close are they to being there in those average norm ranges? So the fourth area is kind of makes some sense. Have a good school psychologist. Have those right people in place. School psychologists can really kind of help establish like some of that groundwork and say, hey, this is, once again, going back what the data says versus what you might want. And the other part is having that special ed coordinator to be able to listen and looking and say, what is the best thing that we can do for this child? So, but kept going through is finding the right people, finding the right fit for your building. And so personnel is really important for that. The fifth area as an administrator, and I thought this was very good, that the biggest thing they look at is the responsibility of the student falls on them. Thinking through the process in an IEP meeting, that their final signature, they said that they think about, I have to think to myself when I sign my name there, and that would be my child. Do I know that they're getting the best education that we can possibly provide? And so I thought that was very good. It all comes back down to where, as a school administrator, like, this is my responsibility that I have to do. So those are some solutions I kind of came up with. I thought there was a couple other interesting things that they discussed. One of those is, dealing with this idea of the amount of money spent towards special education, but yet some of the results are not going to be quite as adequate, meaning that, there's exorbitant amount of money that's spent towards students who will possibly end up just moving and living into a group home versus students who you look at who don't quite qualify for, free and reduced lunch and certain services like that, if they just had a little something else to help them get through, then they might not get pulled down by some of the situations that they face every day in society. I thought that was a very candid point that they made. The last little thing I thought that was very beneficial too is just looking and continually thinking about, as an administrator, my job is to help this child, but then also how can I help the special ed teacher as well. I hope that kind of sums up what my experience was. Thank you so much.